Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the official, unofficial Grace Point podcast. I'm Steven.
I'm Isaiah.
We are your co-hosts, and we are in the middle of a series called Why the Hate, where we try to answer the question, why does our church get so much hate online? And it's a special episode today. We have a very special guest.
Yeah, I guess today we're the official Grace Point podcast because today we have Pastor Ed, a.k.a. My dad, on the show. And we have kind of something
Who's the senior pastor?
Oh, yeah.
Grace
Okay,
Point.
yeah. He's the senior pastor of Grace Point
Yeah.
Church, if you did not know that.
Yeah.
And we wanted to try something kind of different today. Well, why don't you introduce?
Well, how about before we get into the topic? I mean, you guys see it in the title. Why don't you just start by introducing yourself? I don't think people know the story. I wanted to ask, how did you become the senior pastor of Grace Point? Like, because a lot of people have this impression that you founded the church and all this stuff. I was surprised as a freshman and found out you didn't, and all that. So maybe just talk about that a little bit. Just
you really want to go there, the whole history?
As much as you want. Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
so-
I think people are interested.
Okay, so
People want to know.
Yeah, that's not as straightforward as it
Yeah.
should be. We're a 40-year-old church in some way. Because it's in Berkeley where it all started, and current expression of Grace Point is from that period
true.
in 1981.
Yeah.
When I was a freshman, this church started as Berkland Baptist Church,
Yeah.
Berkeley and Oakland, Berkland Baptist Church. I was a freshman in 81. This church started in 81, but I didn't join until 88.
Wow.
January of
7
88.
years.
We were recently married, 87, and we decided that, we went to a Korean church, and we decided, well, we need better discipleship. We need people to mentor us. And I had known the leaders and my friends at Berkland and had lots of admiration for the church. I was involved in youth ministry, and so I felt really obligated. I started it when I was in college, and it just continued. And so we joined the church in 88. It's getting long already, man.
No, it's good. It's good.
So then I was working as a corporate lawyer in San Francisco in a big firm. Kelly was a coder before coders became really cool, working for Sun Microsystems.
Wow.
That's why we lived in Alameda. We're the
Okay.
only ones living in Alameda because she had to commute down to the South Bay. And we're just lay leaders. And one day I looked at what I was doing at the law firm, and I had this moment. I was representing clients like Bechtel and Kaiser. They really didn't need little Ed Kang working on their stuff. Whereas back at church, and that was right when we were shifting into all English.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So
right around
we weren't
88.
we had
We were
traditional
a
Korean English industry.
speaking,
Oh.
Korean culture
Yeah.
Baptist church.
I didn't actually know we spoke Korean. So
No, it was
that's news to me, actually.
exclusively Korean speaking.
wow,
We're
okay.
a Korean speaking church.
Okay, they were
dude.
that.
And then
Korean.
when we joined in 88, actually correct that, we were still largely a Korean speaking church.
Okay.
But we had started an English speaking ministry, which I think by 1990 became completely exclusively English speaking. But we're always a collegiate church. So anyway, so we joined in 88. We started teaching Bible, and right around in a couple of years. So I guess it was in 93 when I finally decided to leave law and do this full time. And my own calling story is very different from your typical how did God call you into the ministry? And there's a certain story that you're supposed to have of strong impression or something like that. And I never heard a voice, or there was nothing like that. What it was I kind of looked around, and I was the leader. Somebody's got to lead this thing. And we're a poor. My first salary was $200 a month. We're a poor church, so everybody was bivocational. Because if you're in collegiate ministry, that's what you're going to do.
College students.
Yeah.
Real time. Yeah.
So.
And then you had a friend who said something to you. I think that kind of triggered the thought, right? The thing about.
Oh yes, I had a really good friend who is a pastor in New York right now, Danny Lee, and Danny said to me one day, and he was an engineer, but he would say these provocative things to me, and he said, "Hey, if you became a pastor and I became a pastor and all of our friends became pastors." Because we're all lay ministers, right?
Yeah.
Kind of loving on younger brothers. best as we could with our day jobs. He said, that still wouldn't be enough pastors.
Wow.
I said, yeah, you're right. And I think the world that we were looking at, it's not like America. It's certainly not the world. What we're looking at is this growing group of English-speaking, American-born, second generation, and at that point it was Koreans. And we looked around and none of us, and by us, I mean English-speaking older ones.
Yeah.
And we were rare. Like most of my friends were way more comfortable in Korean. So Danny and I were sort of the rare breeds. And he said, if all of us became pastors, that wouldn't be enough, meaning there's so many of these Korean, kids that we can, I say kids, but younger brothers. Yeah. And so I said, no, that wouldn't be enough. And he said, okay, then why aren't we doing it? And my only answer was the salary, man. It's like, hey, I worked hard for this job. Went to law school, So that really convicted me. So it was 93, I became a full-time.
And when did he go full-time? He went full time.
Years later. He held up.
He said that, and then he
like a good friend. He made you jump first.
Interesting. I don't know. Maybe I was an older brother that he looked up to because then he quit his engineering job, became a lawyer. He became a way better lawyer than I was. It was actually
he was an engineer,
litigator. Yeah, he was an engineer. He was an unhappy engineer. Anyway, so he went to law school. And then he went to and then he became full time. So I think he became he went into full time ministry maybe 10 years after me, probably. I don't know. I forgot the timing. Make a long story short, 93, I find myself going full time and in charge of the college ministry at Berkeley. And then in 1994, what's the question? How did I become
How did you become the pastor?
Even going full time, like there's that story with Kelly, like what she said to you in the car. Like,
my wife Kelly, she is the she's a PK, not a typical PK because she was really a goody two shoes PK. A lot of PKs like
I was a goody two shoes.
But a lot of PKs like they sin like they invented it. Her thing, and I think my thing, and probably a lot of us who grew up financially struggling in the immigrant era. Our whole thing was just getting a foothold in America that we saw our parents work so hard for. And so her thing was, God, I'll serve you whatever, but not a pastor's wife. So we're visiting our friend who was living on campus at Golden Gate Baptist Seminary, and I still remember the little section of the road between 101 and between 80 and 101 where she said, in a grudging way, hey, if you want to go into full-time ministry, I'm okay with it. That was, but she initiated because I was struggling with it. I was thinking about it. It was such a relief when she said that, and it became very clear.
Wow.
So back to your question. So I was leading the ministry at Berkeley, the college. We had another a friend of mine, leading what we now call Praxis, the post-college. Okay. Back then, we're a lot more college heavy. And then anybody who graduated college, they would become college staff, or they would go and become Praxis. And because it was led by someone else, and the relationship was with us, then it was. I think a lot of people felt that as a rejection, like you didn't make the cut, and so that was unhappy for them. It was definitely unhappy for my friend who's leading this ministry, and people come and say, please pray for me. I'm bitter that I couldn't make it on college team, and he's like, what am I? He eventually went on to plant a church in San Jose and LA, leaving the whole Berkeley church to me, and then. I guess Berkeley.
That time you were leading the English college, the Praxis, and Korean. Was Korean still around?
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother story. Okay, so although we're a Korean-speaking Korean church, there was another Korean congregation that had started in the mid-90s, not mid-90s, mid-80s, and that was reaching out to. So it's sort of like our international ministry, right? They were reaching out to Korean graduate students, and so as we became more English, they became the more Korean. So then the Korean side of it continued. And that was led by someone else. So we were kind of maybe two congregations in parallel. Unlike a lot of immigrant church situations, the English side became more dominant and more financially. We eventually got to the point where we were supporting the Korean congregation financially for a while.
Got it.
And then 2006, the Berkeley network all sort of became autonomous by mutual agreement. And from an objective church world perspective, it was very civil. From an emotional perspective, it was like we were all torn apart because we had pledged to bury our bones together, and we're all close friends, and we had to break up for reasons that I don't necessarily want to get into. I mean, I don't mind talking about it, but it involves other people, and I'd rather not.
Okay.
But it was it started out as a classic church split in a way. Because three churches, the Davis Church, the Berkeley Church, and the San Jose Church, because at that point we're a network of about maybe 7 churches, and we had some concerns with the overall direction and leadership of the church, and so it was decided that instead of fighting that out, that we would just go autonomous in 2006. So that would have been the 25th anniversary of the Berkland movement, and then everybody else took on different names, and that's when we took on the name Grace Point.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, and then we in our other podcasts, we've kind of, the rest is history. We've talked about that a little bit, but I think that was really enlightening. That was really helpful. So yeah, do you want to?
Yeah. So the kind of main agenda for today is we're calling this kind of
Pastor Ed
reacts to instances of ministry malpractice.
Ministry malpractice. It's gonna be painful.
They didn't warn me about this.
Yeah, so let me just kind of back up and explain a little bit about why. So this was my idea, and I would say I don't know this for a fact. I've never actually asked you about this, Dad, but it probably, like, if you had to name the number 1 and number 2 critics of our ministry within our church, I'm guessing that would be me number 2 and my brother number 1, probably. Right? Would you say that's pretty accurate?
That's pretty accurate.
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Just in terms of sheer volume.
And I don't see a close third. It's
Anna,
like
maybe, our sister, maybe. Okay.
No, she's too kind, and she lets you guys do all of the criticism.
Yeah, she makes us say stuff. But anyway, so I mean, I don't know if people know that, but yeah, I mean, like, we're both just critical fellows. I mean, we got it from somewhere, but that's what we're like, and
constitutionally rebellious, which you definitely got from me.
Yeah, and kind of just up in arms type of folks, and we like to, when we see something like, what the heck happened here, and we like to bring things up. So yeah, I mean, so I've had this experience a lot of, I hear about something, usually it's not to me, sometimes it's to me, but sometimes it's like a friend or someone else I know experienced this, and I'm like, what the heck, what happened here? And I go to you, and I'm like, why do we do things this way? And then I was, at least the first couple of times I did that, I was surprised to hear from you, like, what? That happened? And it was like, oh, like, because my assumption is always just, I don't know, you like see kind of an institution and you just assume that it's kind of this monolithic thing that, has all its gears in order and everything happens for a reason and it all is traceable back to some systemic issue or kind of the top lead. And I think part of my maturation process and part of the reason I'm still around is because I kind of figured out, it's not how it is. Like, reality is more complex than that. And like, even the top leader of an organization doesn't necessarily, not everything happens according to their will. I mean, even in this world,
that seems so obvious.
I mean, I don't want to get theological, but like, even God's will is resisted in this world, right? So
yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing. I think I've heard that people think that I'm a dictator and like everything happens under my watch. And as a leader, I got to own all of it. Of course, that's part of what it means to be a leader. But so. Maybe, like, man, I wish, but that's not, like, we're not that, I guess, well-run of an organization, and I focus a lot on culture and ethos, and I don't like rules, I don't like policies, and I know I've said this to many people. I think I've said it openly to, like our whole church. There are aspects of our church I really don't like. And I've said in exasperation, look, if I came to this church as a freshman, I wouldn't last. I'd leave. Can we please, like? So it's ironic, and then I started to kind of realize something else. It's like, why isn't this church in my image? And I thought, that's good, because it's not in my image. This is not the church that would suit me, both as a leader and as a member. And I think a lot of that has to do with my high regard for female voices and female leadership, and my sensitivity to my own very narrow culture. At the end of the day, I'm a baby boomer, Korean male, you know? And you want that church? Well, maybe to some extent, we have aspects of that of our church that is that church because those are our roots. But I've tried very hard to be self-aware and not to make sure that, like, try not to put my stamp on this church too much. Like, you know, do I get my way if I really want? I think so. I don't think anybody would oppose me at the end of the day, which is why I don't express a whole lot of preferences a lot, and our decision-making processes has become laborious because I want to hear from everybody.
That is true. It takes a long time.
Takes so long.
Yeah. Noah would oppose you. Though.
Yeah,
that's the one person who would oppose you.
and you know, like if I start not making sense because I start to get dementia, I can count on Noah to tackle me from the pulpit and make me retire. So that's so comforting. Yeah,
Good.
Yeah. So
I love
think,
Noah.
I think my goal here for today, because I think that's helpful. Not to, like you said, like as leaders, we have to own whatever happens in our ministry. At the end of the day, it comes back to us as leaders, and I think that's just good leadership. But so the goal of today is not to say like, hey, don't blame Pastor Ed for this. It's not on him. That's not the goal. The goal today is to just kind of see that, okay, these are the inner workings of our church, or these are some things that happen in our church, and that's something we need to change, you know, and that we're open to changing. And Pastor Ed himself will say, "I am Pastor Ed, and I do not approve this message." You know? So some of these things.
So we've actually collected a few stories, and they range.
I want to hear your like. We haven't primed him about these. We haven't warned you about the content yet. But we're just gonna share some stories. About ministry malpractice. That's kind of an internal term. I don't know if like that's a term out there.
Wider Christendom.
Yeah, and it's not like anyway, but this is kind of just anything ranging from like kind of the silly and the facetious
blunders,
to like kind of the more serious stuff. So I just want to start out with like a fun one. You may have heard this one before already, but I'm just gonna explain the scenario and then you just give us your reaction, okay? So and these are all we've gotten permission from these people to share these stories.
Oh, you actually know the people.
Yeah, they're all from people within our church.
Oh, okay.
These are not like
we were thinking about
Did they confess to these, or you heard of them?
Oh yeah, we asked people to either volunteer their stories, or it's stories of like close friends of ours.
Okay.
Who knows?
All right.
Yeah, so this is we're gonna start with a fun one, which I think kind of just sort of sets the scene. So this is kind of the sort of thing that could be counted as ministry malpractice. So one of our friends actually has a story about how when he came into our church as a non-Christian freshman, and I think at the point of the story he was still a non-Christian. He was not a Christian at this time, and it was a post-freshman year camping trip with their home group. And on this camping trip, the leader of that trip said, "Hey guys, let's do a game. Let's find the strongest brother." Right, and then so he gave everyone milk jugs full of water, and they held it out like this. So if you're listening, you know, they held it out, you know, like bodies like a T, with the milk jugs on either hand, and see who can hold it up the longest, right? And then afterwards, you know, the sisters wanted to do it too, so they did strongest sister as well, you know. And of course, among the brothers, there was someone who went down the first. So not only did you find the strongest brother, and nobody remembers to this day who the strongest brother was, but everyone remembers today who the weakest brother was, because at the end of that contest, the leader of that camping trip said, "Okay, let's have arm wrestling between strongest sister and weakest brother." And I think there, like, some people were like, "Yeah," and some people were like, "I don't think this is a good idea.
No.
I don't think this is a good idea." But those voices were drowned out by the roar of approval. It was sort of a mob mentality moment. And this sister, who is actually like a black belt in Taekwondo, and she's strong. I know for a fact. And basically, she worked this freshman guy. She was a rising senior. He was a freshman. And she just worked him.
Destroyed him.
And
I heard he went
in front of everybody.
Yeah.
That's a lapse of judgment.
Lapse of judgment. Okay.
Just caught up in the moment. Want to create something.
You know, and all is forgiven. He apologized later.
Yeah. We always say, you know, play the movie. Before you do something.
So we're gonna ramp it up now a little bit in seriousness. So this next one, do you want to explain?
Yeah, sure. So this one is, our church has become really like zealous in terms of reaching out to people, right? And just wanting people to come and hear the gospel and all that stuff, right? And so this one actually traces back before like cell phones and all that. And the dorms at Berkeley used to have, you know, phones and landlines. For those of you who don't know, that's like a phone that's connected to the
It's like
wall.
an iPhone with the cord.
You can't use it. You
doesn't
can't take it
work.
with you. And the phone numbers are tied to the room numbers, right? And in ascending order and whatnot. So you know what the phone numbers are. And this particular staff was trying to contact a freshman, invite him out, and call his number and couldn't reach him, right? And so most of us would be like, all right, I tried. But this staff being very, zealous, starts calling the neighboring rooms, and because it's ascending order, he knows, right? Calls, and maybe I think it was like the fourth door down. He gets someone to pick up, and he goes, "Hi, you don't know me, but I'm so and so, and I'm trying to reach this guy. Can you go and knock on his door and see if he's there, call him back, that sort of thing." So.
Well, okay. I guess two questions about that. Well, first, was that common practice? And if not, what would you tell that staff?
Gosh, no, that was not common
Okay,
practice.
that's
that was not common practice. I like in the world, I don't think that was common
Okay, yeah,
practice. So
Because we don't remember the landline days.
no.
So
okay, so I know this story, and Manny has gone on to become a very fruitful leader.
Yeah.
Since that time.
He's our leader now.
Actually, very effective.
But what was troubling to me was this story was circulating as an inspiring example of perseverance.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so then I had to publicly throw cold water on this.
Wow.
Okay, the result was that Ander is still here.
That was-
it was Ander.
It was
I'm
Ander.
learning so many things about I didn't
Dark
know
Knight
that.
Legion. And so
gaming
it's sort of
handle.
like what to uphold based on the result, but.
Yeah.
Wait, like that result might have been okay, but like don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't.
Not a
good method.
Yeah.
The ends don't justify the means. I had
Yeah.
no idea that was Andrew. Okay, wow.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
All right. Moving on to the second one. Okay. So yeah, like I said, we're kind of ramping up the cringe and the pain, but don't worry, this person is also still around. Thankfully, praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. We should do a series called like "How Are You Still Here?"
Yeah, I think we
Something
should do
like that.
another
I don't
series.
know.
Like, why are you still here? Anyway, so this girl came from a pretty much totally unchurched background. Is that right? To pretty
Yep.
much unchurched background, and it was one of her first events, like first year, and she got the commitment card. We do commitment cards at retreats and things like that, where it's if you want to become a Christian. There's different options. There's I want to make Jesus Lord and Savior of my life. I want to rededicate. I want to
wanna
find out
continue
more about
seeking,
Christianity.
yeah.
And she was a newcomer. She had no idea what
didn't
these
know.
options
I
meant.
was like, what?
And so she just was like, "Oh, it was weird." She didn't fill it out. I think she wrote her name on the card and then left it blank, the rest of it blank.
Mm-hmm.
And then her leader, who we do not know who this is, so don't worry about that. We've kept their identity secret even from us. But her leader pulled her aside
Took her side room.
into a room and said,
Like, hey, like, you just blank.
"Yeah." She's
Are you ready to become a Christian?
She said, "Hey, are you ready to become a Christian?" And this girl said, "What are you talking about? Like, I don't even know what this means.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?" And
But you can imagine
basically-
that's like really high pressure.
Yeah,
kind
I don't
of
actually know how that
situation.
resolved. Hopefully, it
Yeah.
just ended right there. But yeah, literally. So pulling aside to the room, saying, "Hey, are you ready to become Christian? How come you didn't fill out this card?"
Yeah.
So I can say with a fair amount of confidence, I know that that's not common practice anymore. But again, kind of, how would you react if someone told you this is what they did in the staff meeting or something like that? What would be your response to that? Have you heard of this story before?
No, I haven't heard that. But
Okay.
you know what? I mean, this sort of thing probably happens a lot.
Okay.
This sort of thing, like over eager. Oh, somebody filled out a card. Maybe they meant to check off this box. Like, wow, I want to follow up. Half the time that people say I want to follow up, I say don't. Please don't follow up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just said something. I don't really mean for somebody to follow up. Unless it's a cry for help or like somebody's really saying something. So anyway, I think that's a. I don't like that word follow up. Anyway, I'm going off now. So going back to that room where you, I think that's low EQ. It's failure to see what that must feel like from the receiving end. It's over eager. But I can tell this leader would have felt like, wow, there's something special happened.
Yeah.
I want to. Yeah,
Just
so
It's like really, it is
misread
well
the
intentioned. Right?
situation.
It's well intentioned, but it's just sort of
Yeah.
like, oh, you didn't.
well, I mean, I'm saying it's well intentioned because I know that our staff are well intentioned. But if you just zoom in that room to that
That's
room,
It's not what it feels like.
Yeah,
That's
it could
true.
it could also be spun as pretty creepy,
Yeah.
pretty heavy-handed. You know, I mean, I think in some ways, like speaking to that whole salvation decision thing, like we really celebrate it. I think we make a big deal of salvation. Obviously,
makes
like
sense.
yeah,
That,
like
that
if you're a Christian versus if you're not a Christian, like it makes like that's a huge thing. But because it's so important and precious, we I think go out of our way to dial down the social pressure around that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, make sure you're okay. Are you sure? Why don't you think about it? Why don't you write down your thoughts? And that wasn't the case during those times when typical to Southern Baptist tradition, we would have a quote-unquote altar call every Sunday. And people would come up and there would be that decision time, you know, and to bring people to a crisis of decision where they have to like choose Jesus, you know, come to Jesus. And
that's not just Southern Baptist. I mean, I went to charismatic, like, you know, and we did that too. You know?
Every Sunday, you guys.
Not every Sunday, but fairly often. Yeah, just there was some way to respond.
And I think that's healthy in all sorts of ways. I think I miss that. You know, the modern day like seeker driven service where it has to be very slick and like end right there. You know, when I go to charismatic churches and they just have a worship set that's for like an hour and a half and people trickle out and the lights are sort of dim and some people pray and then it leads to like kind of talking here and there. I love that. And we have that after retreats sometimes. But anyway, going back to overeager and you know, high pressure. I don't think we know that's what we're doing at times, but I think we do plenty. I'm sure that sort of stuff happens nowadays too.
Oof. Ouch.
Ouch.
All right. Well, let's move on. Similar to the whole follow-up thing. Let's talk about this one. So we've heard a couple of stories similar to this, but basically the details of this one, where there was a form for church planting, you know, to sign up.
That's how we get people to sign up, volunteers, like the Google form.
We send out an interest form saying, hey, would you be interested in potentially going on a church plant? You know, that's how we formed our teams and things. But this particular person talks about how after that form went out, they didn't feel ready, didn't fill it out, and they got a text saying, hey, could you come over and could we talk? And their leader invited them to their home and they had a talk. And it wasn't like a rebuke. It wasn't like shouting or anything, but they asked, you know, how come you didn't sign up? And the person said, I just didn't feel ready. You know, I don't feel ready at this time to go on a church plant. And the leader basically said, you know what?
Something to the effect of,
I think you're staying here out of a desire for comfort and out of a desire to keep your well-paying job here in the Bay. So can you just react to that, please? Sorry.
Okay, so here I am thinking everybody's volunteering, but that's the sort of thing that goes on. I think for the most part, the spirit of our church planting is people do sign up voluntarily, and then when the form closes, I get like tons of emails saying, I was just still thinking about it. Can you reopen the form? And so I think by and large, it is what it seems to be on the surface. But I put in I designed those forms and I put in all these outs, you know, like, so like we say, people volunteer, but people say, so one of the choices is like, send me out, I'm ready to go, no reservations. And then another choice is like, I'm willing to go as part of my commitment to Christ. So like, okay, well that could be, you know, you could, it depends on the tone, right? That one, like, I'm willing to go, you know, or I'm willing to go. And then third is like, I have some concerns, but I'm willing to go, or you know. So and then state your concerns, and then those concerns could be job, could be aging parents, could be you know, like I really try to break into this field and I just got a job. It wouldn't be good time for me to leave. Like so, all of those reasons are taken seriously into account, especially the like I just got a tech job as an English major. I finally got a tech job. Like no, you stay. You know, like me and my wife were trying to conceive. We're in the middle of, you know, some kind of treatment around that. Oh, no, you stay. You know, my parents are in and out of the hospital right now, and they live in San Jose, like, or they live nearby. Okay, you stay. So there's a lot of reasons why people, like, you know, I'm reaching out to a bunch of students, and they're irregular, but they're really coming around. Okay, you stay. So anyway, going back to this. like calling somebody in and saying like, hey, you should, why didn't you sign up? Like again, I guess it depends on the relationship. Like, wow, I thought you're eager to sign up. I'm surprised you didn't. So it could be that kind of conversation. But then to carry that to a sort of an accusation, like it's because you want to hold on to your, like, what if that's true, right? Because you kind of think you know people, so like I know you, like you know, okay. What if that's true? As a leader, to do that, like I think as a friend to do that. Hey, I thought we were going to go on a church plant together. Like you're just holding on to that job because there's stock options like in 2 years, right? You know, like friends can accuse each other of that. Like, no, shut up. What do you know? They're, because it's an equal relationship,
Parity,
so you can push back. But for a leader to do that. Yeah, I feel very uncomfortable about that. I don't think that should have happened. So back in the days, going back to the altar call, people do this a lot. I'm not going to necessarily say it's sister leaders all the time. I'm not going to necessarily say that. But so there would be, quote unquote, a perfect message for somebody.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about it and like you were struggling with, your source of significance and whatever. And here was a message, on the Samaritan woman. And as a leader, like I'm so expecting you to soak that message in and respond. But alas, there's no response. And by response, I mean like she didn't come forward, right? We used to have 40 people come forward and everybody gets prayed for. So then the service ends, but it doesn't end until the last person gets prayed for. But anyway, so all the leaders are eagerly waiting. So, okay, that didn't happen. And then they would follow up.
There's that word again.
And I'm like, no wonder so many people are coming out, right? Because if you get talked to, even in the sweetest, what did you think about that? Like, because you didn't really respond, even if that's what happened, what does that do? It ruins all future rededication times, all future altar calls. Really because, now it's about, is this relevant to me? Because then I should come out. So then you're ruining it, right? So there's this sort of, you're setting a precedent, you're kind of affecting so I would say don't follow up, don't ever talk to anybody about why they didn't come forward. Maybe they fell asleep, I always say, I'm actually a preacher that's very forgiving about people falling asleep. I am, because people fall asleep at the wheel and they could die, right? So
that's so surprising.
Yeah, it's such a comfortable and, like, high CO2 levels, people feel sleepy. Anyway.
Is that why we got rid of those rededication times? Because I remember those times when we used to have it every Sunday. But
I think our freshman year, it still happened every now and then.
It was
we got rid of it partially because of that, partially because it would just kind of freak out people who are here for the first time, and then there are people in the front and they're being prayed over, and we kind of pray Korean style.
Yeah, we used to do the full prone where you get on your hands and knees and pray like this, and then someone prays. It was kind of weird.
No, I appreciated some of those things we did out of consideration for like the non-Christians coming, because I didn't even know that like doing like praise songs could make them feel uncomfortable. Like, what is this mass karaoke? I came from like I was leading praise and everything, so I thought that was normal.
Yeah, we think that's the most natural thing. You think about it. Who looks at a screen and sings together? Yeah, nobody does that. Nobody does that. And we think it's the most natural thing.
Kind of one follow-up question from this scenario. So I have heard you at staff meetings and in public kind of say stuff like this, like, don't follow up on things like this. And I've heard it's opt-in, like, don't follow. And yet I would say the practice persists. What is your best theory about why people keep doing these kind of things? Like, is it just they think they're the exception?
I think, if what drives people to do this is something like they're driven to do it. So the thinking and the training, like, I shouldn't do it. I should play the movie. What does this look like? How could this be misinterpreted? Like, those filters aren't there when you're in the moment, right? So like people lose their tempers. They know that's bad, and they'll still do it because they're in the moment and feeling this. I think what they're feeling is insecurity and maybe over eager, sincere desire for the good of somebody, right? And that's why I think
it's kind of a mix.
I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. Should I just say no? I should just say this, like, And that's why sisters do this more.
Guys don't really think about that.
Because guys prize leaving each other alone.
That's true.
At a level that most women just don't understand. So anyway, and that's why this kind of ministry goes over relatively okay too, because you care about me.
Yeah.
Like they'll interpret it like that. But I think in the moment so the incentive structure I think is sort of what's at stake too, what's at play too, because like I want people to make spiritual progress
under my leadership.
And then that validates me as a leader. And everybody struggles with that. I mean, I want people to be quote unquote blessed by my message, because that validates me as a preacher, and that makes me want to put together like a good message, right? So it's not that we don't want to live in an incentive-free world. It's just that some of these incentives can create these kinds of like blundery, kind of clumsy ministry.
Yeah. And I think, going back to what you were saying earlier about precedent too, it's kind of like you tend to lead people the way that you were led as well. You know, and so like, and it's hard to unlearn those things because it was really beneficial for you. And then like, but then now it's like a different generation, a different cultural attitudes, everything's changed. But you're just sort of like, well, that was done to me and it was good, and someone did it to this person.
So to go back to the Manny and Ender example, like Ender will say like, oh yeah, Manny didn't leave me alone. He pestered me. He called me 7 times a week. And I'm so glad he did. I'm just making this up. I don't know if that happened. Let's say.
Yeah.
And then he says, well, that's what I'm going to do. Because, man, that was good for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that might have been good for you.
Yeah.
But what about all the other people who voted with their feet and whose voices are not here?
Right.
And in meetings, I consider it one of my roles is to represent them. Yeah. Because they don't have a voice.
That's a really good word for all leaders, actually, to represent the people not in the room. Like that's gold.
Well, because personal stories are so powerful.
Yeah.
And so, like when this person, I ignored their text for 5 weeks, and then they finally came to my door and somehow got into the dorm and knocked on my door. Then I realized, I feel really loved. I'm like, let's keep doing that. It's like, no, what about all the people that would be freaked out by that and be scared? Like they're not there. Their voices aren't. Just so we select for the people who have responded to our style of ministry, and so we keep repeating it. Like maybe not a good idea, not necessarily.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah. Well.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, so we're nearing our end. 2 more. So this one is another one of our friends. He's a church plant lead now. But
so he's good. He's fine.
He's good. But this was his junior year, and he had been under one small group leader freshman and sophomore year, and as a junior he went under this other leader, and it was at a retreat, and they were sharing. And
it's one of those moments where it's like, wow, like again,
it was like a good retreat. People had been convicted,
yeah.
and everyone was going around and sharing like vulnerable stuff. Right, kind of like they were sharing their sins, and sort of it was clear that kind of the expectation here is that you're gonna open up and be vulnerable. And then when it got to this particular guy, he was having trouble, and he was being really kind of vague and unclear.
He didn't want to share vulnerability.
I think he just did. Yeah, he says he just didn't want to share vulnerably, so he was having trouble kind of saying anything. And then at a certain point, his leader at the time,
this new leader
jumped in and said, the reason you're having so much trouble, I don't know the exact words, but something along the lines of, the reason you're having so much trouble is I think it's just because you're proud. In front of everyone else in the group, like it's just your pride, and you just don't want to be honest because you're proud. Yeah. And then he made him go and read the book Out of the Depths and reflect on that after that. So they're both still around. They're good friends.
Yeah,
we had breakfast with both of them this morning. We talked with both of them about this, but
they laughed about it.
Yeah, we laugh about it now. But what's your reaction to that one? That one, have you heard? You haven't heard that one, right?
I've never heard that one.
Okay.
I've never heard that one, and wow. So vulnerable sharing. Maybe I should do a series of rants about sharing, vulnerable sharing. There are a lot of things that are really good, that are so good that it can never be forced. And I've always found guys share not when they're face to face, but when they're side by side.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't do sharing. That's why when I gather, even with you guys, I don't. Frankly, I just don't want to hear it.
That's why.
No, I really don't want to hear it, because I think it's so unnatural. Like, there are a bunch of people, and hey, what'd you get out of the message? Or like, hey, how are you doing? Like, share. And, there's something about that circle that's just so unnatural. And we in the church kind of force these like really unnatural things. Now, when there's something supernatural happens, the Holy Spirit hits, and everybody's just swept up in it, you know. So I'm not going to privilege only natural and spontaneous and chill. Although but I do personality-wise. I think that's kind of a personality defect. I don't like open displays of sentimentality. I like to keep it understated, you know. But anyway, oh gosh, I'm just going off. But no, I really think that was a big blunder. I think, again, like, let's analyze that from the perspective of precedent. Everybody else is learning, dude, I better share vulnerably next time, you know. And it's like offering, you know, juicy piece of meat to a carnivore. It's like my leader wants something, and what does the leader want? Vulnerability, because that's an assurance that you're being honest, right, and that you are humble. I think what the guy said to him is technically true. If you accuse any bro of pride, you're likely to be 90% right, right? Because it all traces to that. Yeah, you know, I think it was beyond inartful. I think that was bad, and I wouldn't do that, and I would have had problems with somebody doing that. Calling somebody out in public like that, I think I would have rescued him right away. It's like, hey, maybe you don't feel like sharing vulnerably, you know. Not everybody has to, and just moved on, right? So, yeah, I guess maybe there's a little bit of like, anyway, yeah, don't. So the thing about vulnerable sharing is also, even in one-on-one settings, like this was awful because it was after, it was that in front of other people. So it humiliates him, as well as creating this atmosphere for the next time you share. But even one-on-one, people want quote-unquote vulnerable sharing. And I think that's a signal of I'm being trusted. And I think if you're an insecure leader, you want assurance that you're trusted. And the way you feel trusted is when somebody shares vulnerably. And because you want that so much, you almost like subtly, or maybe not so subtly, orchestrate that. And I think it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea.
All right, we're gonna move on to the final one here, and this one is a little different, but it's something that a lot of us look back on who were undergrads at the time as sort of it was like a epoch defining time.
Yeah, it was kind of an inflection moment, or it was, yeah.
It was. We're talking about the bros night.
You remember the bros night?
The bros night. So
yeah. I mean, I look back at it with gratitude personally.
Yeah, but I know that just want
mixed,
because I feel like we've just never talked about it as a church in some ways after that. But we talk about it, you know, kind of internally.
There was a lot of like talking about it and just sort of like. Well, that word.
Yeah, but I feel like most people have never heard from you on that.
Yeah.
So I'll just.
I answered a lot of emails about that.
Oh, did you really? Okay. Yeah, so I just gonna go over the details, and I just want kind of maybe like a retrospective on that, just to kind of, I don't know, get your thoughts on it really. But so at the time, it was when we had started Inner High Ministry.
So all bros Bible study.
All bros Bible study. The theme was love.
Even high schoolers.
Yeah, high schoolers all the way up to like the oldest of us. And we had just started the Inner High Ministry. And for those who don't know, Inner High Ministry it's one of our favorite ministries where we go and provide youth services for churches that can't afford a youth pastor, often ethnic churches where the language of the parents is a different language and you know the kids can't understand often. So we send our own team and we go in and act as their youth leader.
Yeah, and so there was this amazing story that had happened because you can't find these ethnic churches, they don't have websites. Like, it's hard, it's difficult. So we're like, our teams were literally driving and just like walking, and then just walking out and just introducing themselves. And there was this amazing story of like this woman who was like, I've been praying. You guys are an answer to prayer, and immediately, can you come like right now and lead the game and preach the message and all of that, right? It was like kind of confirmed for us, like this is the direction we should go.
And since then, we've had so many stories like that of people saying we've been praying for our youth. So
So in the moment, it was moving. Yeah, I remember sitting there. I was a junior at the time.
That testimony.
We presented it to everyone, and you were sort of explaining the Inner High Ministry. And at a certain point, you asked something along the lines of like, how many of you would want to help out with this ministry and, you know, go serve other churches in this way. I think fully expecting that there would be kind of an overwhelming response. And instead, I think the number of hands that went up because I think you asked the college students, the number of hands that went up among the college guys was maybe in the single digits.
Yeah, I think so.
What do you think? Maybe
I think it was single digits.
The teens were single digits.
Yeah.
And I remember because I was sitting next to my brother, Noah, who at the time was in high school, him looking around and going, wow, that's inspiring. Like in this very, and I was like, ooh, it hurt. And I want to say, for the record, we both did raise our hands, but we were all feeling it like,
we were like, oh, that's
what just happened?
This is a really moving story, and then no one's
is responding.
Yeah.
And then you asked again.
Yeah, so you
clarified. You said, I'm not saying like right at this moment, but how many of you?
Maybe you're in another ministry serving. Maybe you got like, you know,
right,
whatever,
like, but you would be interested, like in theory, you know, or you know, given if you had time, you would like to, and maybe like another 5 or 10 hands went up, maybe, you know, in a room of hundreds.
Yeah.
And basically, you went off on the room, and you that was a rebuke. It was a rebuke. You know, it was shouted. It was, you know, at the whole room, and
it wasn't very long.
It wasn't long. It was brief. It was and basically
toned down.
Yeah, and rebuked us for basically just having no heart and lack of love. And the whole theme of the night was love overpowers. So it was very, like, the juxtaposition was very clear. And then kind of you said, okay, well, we have a RSF reserved after this, which is the gym at Berkeley. So we paid the fee. Let's all go play sports, guys. And
all these guys scuttling off.
And we were like, and then, you know, I remember I went home with you after that because I ended up. Me, Noah, and you, we drove home and talked about that. But boy, and it was, man, I mean, a lot of people will look back on that and say that was really good for them. I remember like our peers gathering and talking about it, the class below me, like gathering and just spontaneously, they just gathered and prayed, like without the leaders or anything. And said, like, gosh, where is our heart? And so for a lot of people, it was really good. I mean, I thought
even for a lot of like non-Christians who were there, they were like, whoa, like that's kind of
this church takes this seriously, but not everyone took it that way for sure. There were some people who were very offended, thought that was really inappropriate. So I just want to ask, like, okay, looking back on that now with the benefit of hindsight, I think that was about 15 years ago. It was probably 2010, 12 years ago. Like how do you think about that, and like, would you do the same thing again, or what would you differently maybe?
Yeah. That's like a major cringe. It makes me wince every time I think about it. It's one of those moments where I had no idea that's what was going to happen. I was just so shocked. And I don't know what happened, because that's not how our church or that group of college students were. I mean, that's not, so you guys were juniors that year?
We were juniors.
Yeah, I mean, the very next year as seniors, you guys each started separate, ministry groups, and there was high morale, high passion, high commitment,
very activistic,
high volunteerism.
The class above and below
and
us.
I don't know what, maybe they were shell-shocked, maybe they were just thinking. Some people explained to me later, like, actually it was, I don't know why I didn't raise my hand. A lot of people, griped about it. I know at least one, probably more, left because of that. Well, I think occasionally pastors going very Old Testament prophetic on the group is actually appropriate. I think rebuke is probably most appropriate to groups, kind of a scriptural rebuke, rather than, one-on-one. And not that one-on-one is completely off the table, but the thing that I regret about that is it wasn't planned. It wasn't thought out. I was shocked. And I think because it was a bros night, I think there was this sort of expectation that like we should like go charge up the mountain and like tackle dragons and to see this tepid response, very calculating, like, can I really do that? Well, in some ways, I guess that people are calculating. Okay, if I'm going to raise my hand, I want to back it up, so I need some time to think. I didn't receive it like that, but maybe that's so. That evening feels surreal to me to this day. Like, I don't know why people didn't respond, because our prayer meetings during that time at First Pres was very fervent. It's like, what happened? Was it something about the way I spoke? But then my reaction definitely was like unwise. It's just one of these moments. Makes me cringe. Yeah.
Oh, sorry for bringing that up.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thankful for your thoughts on that, because in retrospect, I think it was good for us. That's my take on
Personally,
it.
yeah. No,
I think we
I
were
like
talking about
Yeah,
this for a
dependent,
while.
I mean, but, I mean, like I didn't cuss or anything.
No.
You know,
No,
just
it was-
for the
it was
record,
just
you know.
raising
It,
voices.
it felt OT profit.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's all that we had. We did
Yeah.
want to ask.
So well, I think like just to kind of wrap up that whole stories part, like we talked about sort of the response. We got your reaction to it, but I think those reactions kind of captured different levels of response we've had. Like I mean, we're a ministry that is pretty open about those mistakes. We talk about those things, we joke and laugh, but then we learn from it too, right? And so there's like what you just demonstrated, a level of personal response to it, like and I've had that before, just as a leader, thinking about going, oh, geez, why did I do that? And kind of personal growth. And then there's things where it's like reflective of our church, and like, oh, okay, that has to change
this
about
is a pattern
our whole
or-
church, and then we talk about that, and we try and there's challenges to actually moving that elephant, steering the ship the right way, and so there's kind of different levels of response to that, right? And I think that's something that people maybe don't appreciate or understand is that. At multiple levels, we are responding, and it's just not sort of like this. It's I don't know what I'm really trying to say, but it's
Well, I guess maybe one question is, do you have any thoughts on like, kind of, as a church, what does it look like to like grow in these ways? Because a lot of these, like you said, are cultural. It's very kind of visceral. Some of it is just learned, and there's like this thing that gets passed down and like, how do we as a church kind of improve and just try our best to make sure that these sorts of things don't happen? Like, I know it's a pretty broad question, but do you have any thoughts?
I mean, to a certain extent, they're always going to happen.
Yeah,
right?
to an extent, people
But
are
then,
always
like,
going to
how
make
do we-
mistakes. People are always going to be insecure.
Oh man, this gotten long, but man, I have multi-level answers to this. So I think about it a lot, right? Because I wonder, okay, what can we do to change? And these are stubborn things to change.
Yeah.
Low EQ, but man, how do you change that, right?
Yeah.
Not reading the other person, not thinking about how does this feel like to be on the receiving end of me. It's great training. I think when people do that and make these blunders and then they think through it, it's like they end up becoming better employees, better moms and dads, and better parents. But well, boy, in the process, so there are several things. Like one thing, we got a lot of lay leaders, trying really hard, and I've compared. I think the malpractice thing came out because my analogy was a teaching hospital. Like a teaching hospital is going to have to raise up physicians, and boy, do they get rebuked when they make a mistake. I mean, that's one of the most hierarchical and scary relationships. The attending physician with their young residents. These are guys that finish med school, but medicine is in the practice of it, and so and everything from bad bedside manners to complete misdiagnosis to blunders in medication. Like, hey, do you guys commit malpractice here at UCSF Med School? And I don't know if they'd admit it, but it's like, yeah, it happens. I've saved a couple, so I can say, hey, this is going to happen. It's sort of like you're going to build a high rise, certain amount of industrial accidents are going to happen. I think that's callous, of course, but and I wouldn't say that, but. How to change this? I think we've tried to change it at the incentive level, and we are constantly studying the unintended consequences of certain good things. Like we pursue a good thing, there are unintended consequences. We pursue something, maybe that's too much, the pendulum needs to swing back. So all of that learning process happens in an organization and individual leaders trying to do this thing that's really, really difficult, which is to build trust and commend the gospel to a non-Christian, and then when they become Christian, to try to help them along to become the most amazing representation of Christ. Yeah. Right? That's really tough, and all of that happens through interpersonal influence and through the Word of God. Right? So as we're trying to do this, I'm thinking, okay, so how many blunders can you make before you don't get another chance? And I think about people who've taken to the internet and telling these stories, and we kind of talked about this in the most lighthearted framework possible, but there are worse stories.
Oh yeah,
and they are not one-offs. They're isolated so that it's not widespread, but they're the sorts of things that can happen. And these are stories of people who are still here. There are a lot of people who are not here, for whom that story is their last story. And that experience then grows in their mind. And as they think about our church, that's the thing that grows, and that's the thing that grows, and they're going to write about it. And of course, everybody else looks at that and say, okay, that's who they are. And I heard a message, they take the worst part of you and make that your profile picture, whereas your life is a video, and it's like Peter denying Jesus versus, him repenting. And and I look at kind of the unkindness toward large successful institutions. And you know what? You don't have that many chances because your blunders become stories that become permanently etched in the World Wide Web. And individuals, I think individual redemption stories are more accepted. Institutional redemption stories are often not.
That's true.
Because these stories are taken to be self-serving, defensive. You have big corporations issuing blanket apologies that are sort of crafted. And so there's cynicism. So how many of these stories and how many of these blunders and people making clumsy ministry relational decisions can we absorb and survive? Is a question that's it's a probing question. My conclusion is that it's a losing battle, and I don't know what to do with that conclusion. But we're going to be spending a lot of time apologizing and training and trying to redress this. But as long as we believe in a ministry where we are trying to obey the call to make disciples rather than a teaching ministry or rather than a ministry where we are not as close, we're not in each other's homes all the time. But if we are going to obey the make disciples and be in each other's homes and keep watch over one another and help each other become sanctified and be like living stones, tightly together. As long as we're going to be engaged in that ministry, I think we have to have a way more dispersed expression of our church where we're not seen as a big institution. And, in some ways that's our future anyway, because at a certain scale, the effort required to align and to be on the same page and to coordinate all of our efforts so that, we're in 38 cities. I always forget the number. I mean, we're 1,600 just staff, bivocational ministers, and we still feel like one big tribe. I mean, trying to keep that while in each location, you're carrying on your ministry without. So let me back up. Big part of this is the layers too. It's like a telephone game. Like your leader above you can say, "Oh, hey, where was Joe, that freshman, this past Friday? He came, but he suddenly didn't come. Do you know where he is?" And if you're the freshman staff, and Joe is one of your guys, you say, "Oh, I don't know," and that doesn't feel like you're a good shepherd there. So then you better know. So then
I feel that way when my wife asked me, where was this person? I definitely.
It's like, what are you going to do? Like, none of my business. Am I my brother's keeper?
Hate that.
But it's really crazy that just that innocent question causes behavior among the freshman staff that is actually shooting us in the feet and making us this like high pressure pestering group.
Like, hey man, you doing okay?
Where were you?
Even if you ask the nicest way, it's like, why are you asking me?
Because that's so bizarre, right? And so there's an example of unintended consequence. Just having a leader ask you about your ministry can trigger behavior that leader never even intended. So I feel like we got to get flat, we got to get small, we got to become more or less autonomous in terms of our tactics and strategy, and even some of our values. I think there are important values, and then there are less important values that have sort of, I analogize it to like those big rocks at tide pools with like stubborn barnacles that are. It's like we have precedent. Like we don't have. Those aren't even our values, so we can't keep stripping them down by me like going on these rants. It doesn't seem to do much. Yeah. I think what we need to do is we need to simplify our values, simplify our structure, become a lot more dispersed, so that the burden of upholding all of these things get taken off of guys like you guys, and you're free to sort of start building, like maybe new values that fits this culture, this campus, this team, and I know when I start talking like this, like different people get sad, and but Kelly and I, we're turning 60 next year, and like I don't want to be 65 and suddenly retire, leaving our church in the lurch, right? I want to plan for a new expression of our church, in which the current group of leaders are sort of like a council of the wise, available to consult, rather than try to control and direct and kind of keep everything together as one. And that future is kind of exciting to me personally. So I think we have to sort of navigate through that. So still some of this will happen. Yeah. But I think these things will get redressed, and we can pivot much quicker in this kind of future. Yeah.
Cool. If I could, I don't know, just take an attempt to like sum that up for people. The way that I've thought about it is sort of like we're mom and pop family, like kind of group that got to a scale that feels really institutional, and like we're struggling to deal with some of the challenges and realities that come with that wide institution. Because, and in some ways,
we're still figuring out our identity.
In some ways, we don't even come to grips with that identity because we still feel like the mom and pop. So you don't even know that you're actually perceived as an institution, right? And so then maybe the key is to change something so that we go back the other way, and
maybe just get smaller in some ways. Yeah. So I think final, just kind of
just to wrap things
final
up.
Question would be, I want to get a little bit into the online stuff. So I think just one thing. There's a lot of accusations out there that you've had in the past that you're kind of a denier that our church has issues, that you say, I don't think you've ever said this, but that you've said there's nothing to the online criticism and it's all fabrication. So just to set the record straight, could you just react to that? Like, is that your reaction to the online criticism, that there's nothing to it?
No, I don't think. Well, I mean, who knows what I've said? Did I say that? Like, maybe there's nothing to the online criticism in a particular instance of the online criticism. Online criticism has been with us since 2006. It's been ever present. I think the current iteration of it is the most intense, though, and maybe that's a reflection of not just the stories that are on there, but kind of the direction that our culture has gotten, where there's a lot more. Like a frightened response to these kinds of allegations. But in every iteration of our online criticism, I experienced a bunch of things. First, initial woundedness, bewilderment, but man, the way this person writes and what this person is saying, she'd be really surprised, or he'd be really surprised how much I agree with what they're saying. It's just if you could see the bigger picture. If you could see the bigger picture. I think when when you guys are married, like when you have marital strife, like you're capable of thinking a certain way about your spouse, right? And you just take that, like you can, like, wow, your spouse is a monster, right? But there's a context, and there's the sort of the ups as well as the downs, as well as the so it's like even the most surreal painting, you kind of recognize what's being depicted, and that's almost always been my experience. So I recognize that. The other thing is I very strongly object to the fact that this is put on the internet. And I'm a little bit of a Luddite. I'm very very suspicious of technology's impact on turning life and turning people into a certain way. But we're supposed to deal with this in-house, internally.
We as in Christians.
We Christians. And the way Christians call out each other and kind of take on secular categories of abuser and the abused, and one side are just villainous and demonic, and that's the way the world works, because there's no hope or grace or the larger perspective that I'm a sinner, just like D.L. Moody's famous thing about somebody writing slanderous stuff about him on the newspaper, and said, well, if the man knew me really, he would have a lot more things to say. And that's sort of my stance. Even though a lot of the stuff that's written about me personally is actually straight up false, not just accusations of like he's a totalitarian, maybe that's true, I don't know, but like factual allegations about our finances and things like that. It's like I actually know that that's false. So there's all of that, but aside from those straight up false things, like I think, okay, well, I should take a beating, we should all take a beating every now and then, and like worst aspects of us, like, yeah, you did that, like, we tend to forget that, right? And these online criticisms are a great reminder, like, hey, we do some really goofy things and worse, and we've done that. And that's on us. I just wish that wouldn't stay permanently, forever on the internet, and for everyone who's trying to give us some kind of chance to read that and get spooked and run away, and they don't get access to the gospel. And, we really try hard to preach the gospel evangelistically. And that's the part that then makes me look at the whole thing and think the whole project is illegitimate. Even though the specific posters and the postings are like, oh man, if we talked about this face to face, we could totally have a meeting of the minds.
Yes, emotionally, it just feels like, why are you doing this? And it gets hard personally to separate that out from, like, okay, these are legitimate criticisms, from like, why do you have to do it this way? I've definitely experienced that.
Yeah. And I think everything you said is a good word, not only for like our own church members to kind of think about, but like, it's not just our church, it's all pastors, churches facing this sort of thing, and all Christians kind of getting like really entangled in the muck of all this. And I think there needs to be like almost like a fresh movement of Christian civility online,
fresh commitment to
like
civility.
That
would be really nice.
Yeah, if all Christians could act like Jesus online, that would be a great witness to the world,
Yeah.
But man, I think that's a great place to.
That's a great place to end.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Very, very illuminating. I think people will find it pretty helpful to just hear this from your lips.
So. I think so. And so I hope that gave people a really good perspective. So like, subscribe, Pastor Ed. You gotta like and subscribe to this podcast. If you
haven't already.
Thank you so much.
All right, but thanks for joining us on the official Grace Point podcast. See you guys next week.